Good afternoon, everybody. My name is George Farquhar. I am a director with Lean Construction Ireland, and I will be your facilitator today. Apologies, I am having webcam problems, so I just can't see you at the moment. So I would like to welcome you to this Lean Construction Ireland webinar presented by Kevin McHugh, and Kevin's an Associate Director with Mace. The title of the webinar is Sustaining the Last Planner System. Please, if you have any questions, type it into the question box, and we'll gather the questions and ask Kevin after the presentation. If there's any questions that we don't get answered during the webinar, we'll follow up by email. So as I said, the speaker for today is Kevin McHugh. Kevin brings experience from a uniquely diverse series of roles he's undertaken during his career to date, from senior project engineer, project manager, construction manager, the construction supervisor, to planner and project manager. He has developed an in-depth understanding of what it takes to deliver lean construction, understand the requirements and apply lean techniques to underpin his construction management experience at each stage of a project. Kevin was last responsible for developing the production control system using the Last Planner system and working with the supply chain and the Mace management team to produce an effective system that communicates site activities throughout the project. He's also managed the digital process to integrate the production control process with the project management KPIs, using virtual management and identifying high-risk activities off-site and on-site production activities to monitor progress. And he's involved in deploying an integrated project delivery model in large-scale projects. So he recognises the need for close collaboration, strong stakeholder management in the project delivery. This includes supply chain management and promoting modern methods of construction. So Kevin is focused on providing a lean project delivery system that identifies opportunity for continuous improvement. So there's a lot to take in there, but I will now pass you over to Kevin for his presentation. Thanks.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, George, for the introduction. As George said, I'm responsible for lean construction management, and one of the production tools that we use is the Last Planner system. So what I'm going to talk about today is sustaining the Last Planner system. Like all lean tools, they're usually brought in as a reaction to maybe poor productivity and used as a continuous improvement tool. However, sustaining the system as a standard system for projects going forward can be difficult. It has been a challenge for us with Mace over the years as we go through different phases of a project and onboard new contractors. So while it's a very useful system, it does take a decent amount of work to maintain and improve. So let's see. So yeah, so look at how do we recognize that we had a challenge. So in 2016, I was first introduced to the Last Planner system, and we were using it on a large data center job in Clonee. It was a traditionally run project, of course, like using the critical path method, to push down programs. The packages were fixed price lump sum packages were given out, so people managed their own risk. So it sort of generated silos themselves, where people had to manage their own mini projects or their own mini packages, and it didn't promote the use of collaboration. While we were using the Last Planner, we weren't using it fully, and we found that we weren't getting the necessary results. So I did some research at this. At the time, I was doing a master's degree in project management, so it was part of my studies as well that I was focused on the Last Planner system. And when I came across this slide, we could recognize it completely, that 60% of our time approximately was non-productive time. and only 40% of our time on site was productive. If you equate that to man hours, it's a massive number. And typically the way it was broken down, of that 58%, 25% was missing information. Preceding works weren't ready, materials or the correct materials weren't ready, the right equipment or tools, were they not hired, were they not serviceable, were they not tagged in on time? You know, they were recognized, these wastes, from our dealings with the trades. A lot of waste as well as unnecessary movement, 13%. So the movement of materials, we were double handling materials, we were putting materials in rooms that weren't ready, and we were trying to work around materials. So there was a lot of movement, and in the data center environment, a lot of the materials had to be put up at ceiling level, and there was a lot of work using MEWP. So there was a lot of movement in MEWPs, going up, going down, going for materials. So there was a lot of, we could recognize that there was a lot of unnecessary movements. And again, with that was material handling, like trying to maintain and manage the vast amount of materials that modern construction sites have to deal with, and managing waste materials. So products in, products out was a challenge that we recognized. And then defective or reworks, you know, and some of them could be related back to the excess of materials and unnecessary movements. If you could reduce all of that, you could reduce the damage after install, and again, you know, reduce the wasted time going back to repair works. And I suppose lean construction itself was brought out from the advances in lean manufacturing, you know, and I suppose the Toyota production system is one of the flagships that was set out, where they had a manufacturing waste of 26%, you know, so 74% of their time was productive. And that's what we strive to do with, you know, introducing lean construction as a last planner system. So if we're talking about values and waste here, you know, so again, if we're talking about being productive, we're talking about adding value and reducing waste. And if we're saying 58% is waste, you know, what are the wastes, you know, and how can value be defined? So value is based on a customer's expectation. So anything that adds a cost with no value is a project waste. So customer and trade alignment is required to reduce waste on a project. And that's where lean construction is focused on integrating project stakeholders, including the client and customers, and focusing on the systematic identification and removal of waste. And that's done through continuous improvements and collaborations. So we touched on the 8 wastes there in the previous slide, where we have defects, overproduction, waiting, non-utilization of talent, unnecessary transportation, excess inventory, unnecessary motion, and extra processing. So they are sort of like a benchmark of your 8 wastes, to recognize them in your production system and to try and systematically remove them to produce a more productive system. So before we touch on the last planner system, I suppose it's worth just to define what it is. You know, what is the last planner system? From the Lean Construction Institute, they say the last planner system is a project production that promotes the creation of a predictable workflow among various parties so they can retrieve reliable results. The last planner system allows potential hurdles to be found and addressed before they slow down the flow. So in effect, it's about managing workflow downstream. So what you should do is usually develop through a master schedule. This sets out the milestones of how a project is going to go from creation to handover. This is what should happen, more or less the sequence of how it happens, and that's what is the should part of it. Phase scheduling is a little more detailed than the should. So it specifies handouts, you know, so high level constraints, I suppose, like to say a fit out would have to be complete when the building is weathertight so you don't damage the installation. So that's specifying a handoff. The look ahead planning is the can part. So we've gone through the make ready process. We had a look of how we got all our materials, have we got our resources, have we got our correct design. We've had a look at it as a proper look ahead, and all the prerequisite needs are identified and they're planned out. So your look ahead planning is what you can do. This goes then again further into more granularity into the weekly work plan. That's what you will do. So you've definitely got the resources. You're definitely going to have people working in this area. You definitely have materials and paperwork in place to do the required work. And you definitely know what it's going to look like. You know how to hand it over. So it's planned safely and it's to the required quality. So that's what we did. And from there, what we did we do what we said we do on our weekly work plan? What went well? What didn't go well? Did we have any quality failures? Did we have any safety issues? What did we have that can allow us to improve the system? So that's the learning we have to get. And doing that as a system, you need to the last planner system involves all of those steps. You know, it's not just developing a weekly work plan. It's not just meeting in the morning for a whiteboard meeting, and certainly not just posting the critical path for people to push down. So it's very important. I think that's one thing that we did learn, that the last planner is a system in itself, and you can't cherry pick maybe the easier parts to do without looking at the harder parts, which is the detailed work planning and the PPC reviews. So to improve, one of the things that we did, we talked about an integrated project, so a delivery system. So it's not an IPD contract by any means, but we had to get team alignment. So in the center picture there, we have designers and clients and trade contractors talking about their expectations of the job with the QA and QC. So how do we deliver the job? What are the constraints? So each project is unique. You know, you can use learnings from previous projects, but each project is unique, and expectations and alignment was there. So this kind of effective communication allowed us to develop milestone plans. So the mapping day was there, as you can see in the second picture, but this is where our high level milestones were mapped out, and we generated a program. So this got an effective buy-in from everybody that we could achieve a master schedule. So there was a bit more substance to our master schedule, so it gave more credibility to the master schedule. There was a lot more involvement. Now, again, the trades weren't contracted to do any of this, but it was a model that we brought in. We got people to buy in, and it was supported by the client. So, you know, it just generally got the ball rolling. It just set the stage for a collaboration, which allowed people downstream of that, so the trade supervisors or project managers and contract managers to engage, because they're directors and leadership to engage. And that was a kind of important thing for people. It's a people aspect. If people are given the authority to do the job, we can able to communicate effectively with each other. It improves and it validates the process better. Then, you know, we have to maybe more targeted workshops with more detail. You could have models in here, and using digital tools as well, maybe to break down silos and increase transparency. So you're able to highlight with more detail. In targeted workshops, you could look at specific rooms, specific services, get more detail into your plan and build out your plan in greater detail. So again, when it came to integrating the trade contractors, there was a lot more detail in there, and allowed or improved collaboration. So that's what we did. But what happened or got us to start working like this? In 2016, when we started the last planner process, we didn't really have look-ahead plans, even though they were mandated that you couldn't go to work without them. They were usually a snippet of the contract program, so there wasn't any look ahead process. But you can't argue that you were given a look ahead plan, because, you know, but it wasn't a collaborative plan, and it wasn't done by actively removing constraints. We didn't look at our PPCs. You know, we were working very hard to actualize our plans to make sure we got as much work as we did do. We were getting about 40% of our work done and not getting any learnings from that. So there's an opportunities for improvement was gone there because we weren't managing PPC. We had poor attendance to meetings, so our collaboration meetings, although they were there, the wrong people were at them, where people couldn't make commitments because they didn't have the authority. There was people that were unprepared to plan, so therefore the collaboration meeting didn't get any value out of it, and it maybe indeed needed another collaboration meeting. and the lack of unpreparedness as well, that means that the make ready needs and constraints were toilet. So it took maybe 5 or 6 meetings to get what a properly prepared one meeting could do. So the no tracking versus plan versus actual means we weren't able to measure and understand where we were. And again, there was a disconnection from our strategic plans, which we were doing in the office. We were collaborating very well, to daily site plans, where daily site plans were built ad hoc at whiteboard meetings or at evening meetings just before. So they were very much reactive and not a coordinated plan. So in January 2017, we knew we were working very hard. We were doing very well on most things, but there was a lot of hard work and the collaboration could improve. So we introduced, again, we rechipped the last planner system. So we reacted to what we saw on the field, and we started by introducing the PPC tracking and improving our short-term look-ahead coordination. And those 2 steps more or less transformed how we operated on the project. So previously, as I said, we were similar, as I said, to the first slide. We were, 60% of our time was non-productive. We were having a PPC averaging 50, 55. And we started to introduce the last planner system in January in 2017. And that reconfirmed that we weren't doing as much as we needed to do, and what our plan percent complete was well below 60%. However, we did, with the PPC, we were able to measure it and get some learnings from that. So by the end of January and certainly into the middle of February, we were able to get our PPC up to 78%. And then we had it just snowballed into that the information was there, the PPC was there, the information from the field was being used in our strategic planning. So our planning became more effective, and a level of stability came into the plans, and that was maintained and increased there for the duration. But it did show quickly, although that there was a last planner system in place, but we weren't using it all effectively. So I think the quick turnaround in that PPC was the fact that there was a willingness to do there. There was a lot of frustration about people working really hard and not getting the best results. They knew there was a better result to be got, and it was only minor tweaking, and it was a easier one to sell at this point because people wanted to collaborate better. And how did this happen? So we were able to get feedback from the reasons of why we weren't completing our works. What was the major failures? And this provided field information that we could use in project management. So, this is direct information, near live information from the field. It was brought into us from a strategic planning level, saying, look, this is wrong, we're sequencing wrong. There was a package interference, design. There's a lot of design here that we need to go. We need to just break down all these barriers. And over the weeks, the level of information increased and increased, and we were able to use this as a plan, do, check, act cycle, which is essentially a last planner cycle. You plan your works, you do your works, you check your works, and you action. You use your information, and the fact that the information was used, it improved the value of the information and improved the collection. It was easier to collect the PPC information, where people understood better that it wasn't a criticism of people's, not completing tasks, but it was actually used as an improvement metric. So again, that increased the amount of tasks committed. So even though, as I said, we went from a 40% PPC to an average of a 70% PPC, when we started the project, as in January time of our first week, we were average about 80 tasks over the whole project, which is a vast project. But as we got better at coordinating and collaborating, the volume of tasks per week increased to 180, a massive increase of the detail of the planning as well. And that really improved the coordination. It was much detail. It wasn't like I was hanging the ceiling. We were putting up high level brackets. We were putting in uni struts. We were putting in hangers. We were putting in tiles, service. The breakdown of information was much better, and the increase of tasks completed went from about 30 tasks a week up to over 130 tasks a week. So, you know, we were maintaining our PPC, but with an increased level of detail. So that was a catalyst for improved last planner system. And I suppose that's the same graph over the view, the number of tasks and the PPC being maintained. So as the information was fed back into the system and there was an understanding that we could, you know, expand on our weekly work plans more, and people learning from others because it was done in a collaborative environment, you know, the best plan was put up as the template, and each other of the trade contractors, you know, had a benchmark and a template to work. So that improved and increased the collaboration between parties. So we were able to use the trade partners to work with each other, get the information they required. They were able to ask more questions of each other, you know, because they got more familiarity with the other trades' work and how it affected and how they interacted with each other. So all this, you know, how people managed and to communicate with each other improved the system. So yeah, so we weren't able to improve the control of our production. We reacted from good control, which was the industry norm, to, I would say, excellent control in our production. And so, you know, the challenge now is how do you maintain this and expect this as the correct standard and not use it as an intervention. You know, so what did we find from our initial findings here is the last planner system engagement improved as each contractor realised how more efficient they were in managing their resources. The quality information improved as each trade communicated what was needed and improved the quality of the plans. And crucially, the learnings from the weekly work plans were used to improve the project plans. And from a cultural and behavioural aspect, the fact that people were able to express what was breaking down, they could see that it was being escalated and used to promote better planning for them. You know, I suppose gave more respect between trade contractors to trade workers and management and design teams and clients. So there was a better understanding, which increased collaboration between all parties, not just maybe trade contractors, and that did change behaviours positively. So the silo mentality, which was typically enforced because of your package breakups and your risk management, you know, that there was a greater understanding that in order to maximize your profits or your productivity, you do have to interact with other packages, and therefore, you know, it was a better way of managing your risk. And also, you know, as you could see the success, there was more buy-in and it was easier to promote the system. So we had to ensure now that the production planning was the standard. So we had to identify opportunities for improvement. The initial engagement from the last planner system was from a semi-traditional management system, so there was an appetite to engage with the system, and that promoted, you know, the increased collaboration and turned into a successful project. But each project is unique. It starts from a design phase, production phase to handover phase. So the last planner system has to be modified and booted up every time to suit each phase. I think to maintain it, it does take a lot of effort to do the last planner system. There's a lot of collaboration meetings. It is not an easy fix. It provides great rewards, but it does require a lot of effort. So what we had when we went through our initial cycle, we had a stable meeting structure. So we knew our collaboration meetings, our whiteboard meetings, they were very well connected. We were able to get valuable information and identify opportunities for improvement, and we understood our waste better. The last planner meetings were well attended, and the people were well informed, and that was a more effective meeting as well. Excuse me. And most importantly, the whiteboard meetings, the daily huddles, referenced the works that was done in the plans. They weren't ad hoc meetings that were redefining their own plans or were run by the loudest voice. It's basically a very much a collaborative meeting where everybody had their say. But there was areas to improve. You know, we did have to improve on our PPCs, even though we were increasing the number of activities. Were we getting the right reason codes? We thought there was an improvement there. We thought there was better detail to be had in our weekly work plans, even though we did increase it. we thought there was better or more detailed plans to do. And we attended the daily huddles had to be standard campus-wide. We noticed them different, whether it would be cladding or groundworks, interior fit-outs, or maybe engineering rooms or plant rooms or roof works. They all had slightly different ways of managing their daily huddles. So we saw there was an opportunity to improve there. So we worked on that, and what we did find was that digital tools could support that. So if we fully digitized the tools, then it was near real-time information. We had to obviously bring technology into the field. So we used a web-based system where you could use apps to update your plan in the field. So you didn't have to, go back to the office to update things, and a lot more people could update the tasks as they went along. We brought screens down to our whiteboards where we were able to update the plan. So we're trying to create a single source of truth. And we increased the level of detail. So we increased the number. We had a design last planner. We integrated that. We had obviously a production last planner for the works in the field. And then we had quality last planner and commissioning last planner. So all these things connected and made it a more integrated system. And we were also then able to use BIM in the weekly work plan. So we were able to integrate more of the model. We used the BIM field for updating the quality records, and we're able to introduce that as well. And I suppose a catalyst for that was the COVID pandemic. We were already on the road to trying to do this, but it certainly escalated when people were forced into more restrictive working, and allowed us, it gave us an opportunity to really drive home and mandate the digital tools, which was easier as well because people were getting a good reaction. They were able to work from home and get good information from this. So we were able to keep a lot of people working through difficult times. So how did that look? The increased weekly work plan. We had quantities of work. We had labour allocations to the plan. So it wasn't just a description of a plan. It wasn't just in a location. We had a volume or percentage plan, or we could have linear meters per week. We could have a plan versus actual labour. So we could have an increase. So are we honouring our commitments? So these were planned in our weekly look-ahead meetings, the 6-week look-aheads. They were resourced out, and then they were managed by the guys in the field. So rather than having 6 or 7 guys managing the production control system, we now had 100 people. We had supervisors, ganger men, all spread out, a lot more people putting in their information. So even though we're generating more information, we're generating more easier ways to manage the information. So it wasn't creating more work. So it wasn't generating another waste of over processing, which we talked about. So we got over process information where you're locked in rooms and it doesn't really work. So it was important that we weren't creating another waste by trying to, it had to be an improvement for people working in the field. So to look at that, the volume of tasks that we were tracking now went up a lot higher, from daily tasks up to, it's 350 daily tasks per week that we were able to manage through digital platforms. And you can see by the status there, they were either complete or incomplete. And that was one of the improvements. So if you're putting stuff in there, it had to be done. It wasn't just left behind and not ignored. If you don't actually put a yes no against all your tasks, you're not getting any value out of your last planner system. It won't give you a proper PPC, and it's very difficult to give you an improvement metric. So it's very important to have that rigor in the system. And again, I suppose digitization, we're able to give that, and I was able to use these kinds of graphs to show that we are keeping on track of it. And if there was people falling back on it, you can say, look guys, you need to step up your game here. Everybody has to be involved and keep the last planner system working. But again, it increased the value of the information. We were able to understand why tasks were not completed in more detail. We were able to link pictures. We were able to link reports. We were able to link the models. We were able to, you get a better idea how you're trending during the week, and it gave us a bit more predictability. And the reports were based from field information, so it improved the collaboration between stakeholders and allowed us to integrate better, you know, because it was used from the field information, it was updated from the field, and it was managed in the teams. So then, I suppose, we have a big room environment essentially where we do our package integration. So we digitize this environment because previously you were PDF and your labour histograms, your PDF and your weekly work plans, you're probably PDF and your earn value, but they're essentially out of date by the time you get around to looking at them. So digitizing the dashboard provided near real-time information to collaborate in the big room scenario where all project stakeholders collaborate. So the continuous improvement cycles and access to the last planner system data from the field actually increase the trust between project stakeholders, and that in turn improve collaboration. So all this information was developed by trade contractors and managed by trade contractors. So it was their updates, their plan, their reasons for failure, and it just, you know, gave a bit more authority to the plan. As project managers, we were managing all these trades and making sure the integration was right, but we were able to get a greater understanding. And I suppose measuring the tasks and measuring the issues gave us a greater understanding. The better the understanding we had, the better we were able to put tools in there to manage. You know, we were able to understand the issues, we were able to mitigate and manage the process. And as we improved the way we managed and everyone got organized with their management, we had a control of the process. So when we understood it, we measured it to understand it. Now we understand it, we can manage it, and when we can manage it, we can control it. So that all enhances the production control system. So how is it? Like, again, it's to really go back, it's really people focused. Your last planners are the guys there standing doing the work in the field. It's all based around them. So if they are not using the plan, you know, it's not working. So it's really important that you recognize who your last planners are and that you're getting the information from the field, because that's where the value lies. So having all the different supervisors updating their tasks and communicating to each other during the day and doing ad hoc, you know, you certainly do some minor collaborations at the whiteboard, but they're much standard. It's very much, are you doing what you're saying you were doing? And another important point of this is that there was no unplanned work done. So unplanned work could be equally as detrimental as not getting your planned work done, because it's out of sequence. It could now be the poor quality and could, you know, potentially be unsafe. So having that level of detail where each contractor can communicate their planned works, ensured unplanned works weren't done, which could foul up other trade contractors. You know, the out of sequence works previously could get into our plan because it wasn't as rigorous as this. But having a rigorous plan and a well-detailed plan that could be communicated effectively every morning, you know, that increased the visibility, and we were able to update the status of each work area. So that showed that information from the field can be brought into the big room environment there on the right-hand side, where all the updates from the field are automatically updated. And it gave us an opportunity to analyze near live information, and it made us communicate more effectively. So again, it's about an understanding between trade contractors, designers, clients. We were able to understand the intricacies of the works in the field, to understand what was going well and what needed to improve. So that level of detail improved the cooperation as well as collaboration between trade contractors, because it was in everyone's interest to get the project done in a holistic view. So cooperation was key to doing that. And that cooperation increased as the level of trust between parties delivering on their plan increased as well. So, you know, having the plans that are updated to a current status of DAVs for daily activity briefings and brought into all levels of production control meetings really improved the transparency and the effectiveness of the last planner system. So yeah, so why don't we all do it? Why is it so difficult to sustain? As I said, when we started, we had standard production problem that we saw that we wanted to improve on, but then how do we maintain it? And I think it's respect for people. It's a lot about acknowledging who your last planners are and making sure that people can effectively communicate with each other. And that does change the behaviors on site. So, lean construction itself has grown in acceptance within the construction industry, and it is in design as well. So last planner for design is also an effective tool. The goal for the production management is a smooth, even, calm, and it doesn't stimulate firefighters, heroes, or reactions. So before, typically it was people glue holding plans together, and as the last planner system came in place, so we integrate more parts of it, was actually the system that was holding things in place. So we weren't doing diving catches. It wasn't last minute, people getting applauded for saving the day. It was a much more calm and even flow to it, and that takes a lot of trust and time to do it. And again, it boils down to respect that management and everybody recognizes good work. You don't have to go over and above to recognize that you're doing a steady and good job. So I think it's a cultural and behavioral change as well to maintain an even, smooth management system. And it does take a lot of time and effort to maintain a plan. It does take a lot of collaboration. It does take a lot of preparedness, to get your information in order, to get your constraints, and I suppose to communicate effectively, you need to be in a safe environment. So if you're going to produce a plan that's not comfortable with project stakeholders, and you're going to get roared at by somebody, you're not going to be, too fond of giving that plan. So behaviors is a very important part of that. And there's a saying of leaving your stripes at the door. So it does need to have the maturity there where we're able to effectively communicate whatever the message is, and being transparent can be uncomfortable with project stakeholders. There is always an element of holding your cards close to your chest, particularly, I suppose, with the way contracts are dealt out, that you're managing your portion. You need to make sure that that you cannot be blamed or effectively blamed for any part of it. I think that's important as well, that transparency can be uncomfortable. It does effectively work in the long run where people can identify the resources when they're there, and you're not having to bring extra resources to site because you're told to by the program, even though the work isn't ready. So there's a level of maturity there that can be difficult to break down and maintain as a last planner process. And then there's the unique barriers to pull production management system. Teams are distributed across the country or the world, so it's not easy to get people into the same room. That's how can you effectively collaborate? And I think digital tools have helped that. There's certainly a lack of training and onboarding for production management. The effective use of last planner is certainly a behavior of a socio-technical system. So there's a technical part to it, but there's also a social part about being able to communicate effectively. And again, probably as we said before, there's a reluctance to engage in transparent systems. And smaller budgets don't allow time for full-time facilitation on a project basis. The last planner can be used on any projects, big or small. It doesn't need to be digital. It just needs to have that process of the plan, do, check, act. And maybe the last, it's simple, but it's not easy. It's simple in terms that you're asking people to do what they can do. It's not easy because that takes a lot of effort and it takes a lot of trust. And it does, you need to embed that culture and have that mindset from the top down. So what probably isn't on that slide that should be on that is that leadership is key for the successful implementation of a last planner. So I suppose the last slide is what's fake lean, what's real lean. Fake lean is just continuous improvement for the sake of it. Do a lessons learned. Yeah, we've done a lessons learned. We put it away there. We've had a chat. Yeah, I'm not really going to say what my real problems are, but I'll give enough information. It's considered continuous improvement, but continuous improvement and respect for people is a better way of looking at it. How people can operate in an environment, in a respectful environment where they can communicate effectively, where they feel they're listened to you know, and where people can actually actively collaborate with each other. So the focus of the improvements and the sustainment of the last planner system was to improve the collaboration between stakeholders. That's basically how people can talk to each other. And the process allows trades to effectively communicate with each other. And it also gave them greater control and ownership of the system. It was their plans that they were putting in. They were updating their plans and they were basically communicating with each other. And this improved how people on the project interacted with each other, and it gave a greater understanding and an increase of respect between people and disciplines. And that improved as the project continued. So you could see the volume of work and the volume of quantity of information on the task. So there's loads and loads of things that snowballed and improved. And because the improvement was focused on the users, that helped to improve the last planner system. But I think in the long run, it helps to sustain the last planner system. So there, that kind of concludes the journey of how we started the last planner system as a reactive system to traditional workings. We got it working. There's loads of different things that we put in, you know, modern methods of construction, there's loads of things you can do, but the message today was really is to, you know, the process itself is a social technical process, and it really needs the buy-in of people, the support of leadership, and active, honest and effective communication to sustain the last planner system. So thank you.
Kevin, thanks very much for that. I'd like to thank you for your very insightful presentation. We'll now move on to the Q&A session, and I have some questions there to fire in your direction. You might have answered some of them during your presentation, but we're just going through them anyway. You mentioned during your presentation that you referenced the data center, which I think I know what one you're talking about. But is the last planner system, is this used on all Mace projects, or are you just specifically referencing the data center project?
No, it's used on numerous projects, but I suppose the case study itself was based on the data center. The last planner system itself for Mace would be, you know, it's a standard Mace practice. It's, you know, I think it's very difficult to comprehend and understand the last planner system when it's just explained to you and rolled out to you, but it is important. We did have facilitators helping us to understand the process, but as we got in to the process, we realized we weren't using the process right. We were doing a kind of fake lean, and we were just ticking boxes to say we had 6-week look aheads, and as I explained, we weren't effectively communicating with each other. But again, it took a while to understand what those breakdowns were, and I think, fortunately for me, I was doing a master's at the time, so it was in my interest to actually look at this in more detail, and I think understand the behavioural breakdowns was more important than the system breakdowns, and why people weren't, you know, as I said, it sounds simple, why doesn't everybody do it? There's a reason they're doing it. There's a reluctance to share the information. The industry is very much a siloed, fragmented industry, so it does take a lot of effort to break down the silos and introduce an effective last planner. But so it's used across the board, but the different maturity levels in different areas. And then as a project finishes, are you able to replicate it and rebuild it? So it's hard. It is a hard process to sustain over a long period of time.
Okay, thanks. Who collected the raw data for PPC? Is it trade supervisors, Mace project team, and assigned resource? How was that data collected?
Yeah, okay, so the data, the plan itself is prepared by the trade contractor, so it would be prepared as a 6-week look ahead. That information is brought in then to a coordination meeting where all the 6-week look ahead, so, you know, even though the system says you do a 6-week look ahead, then you go for a weekly work plan, that is still semi-siloed, you know. So we brought in a platform system where we can upload all our 6-week look aheads onto a one system so everybody can see everybody else's work. Therefore, you can see how you're interfacing with other people. And then we go into a weekly work plan meeting. So when the trade contractors have organised the materials, permits, labour, everything they need to do the job, we do a weekly work plan coordination area where we sequence out the work. We agree with each other who's going into what area first. So that is put in. But then the information is, the trade supervisor with a Mace manager will sit down and go through their PPC at the end of each week. A lot of the information is updated now by the trade supervisors in the field, not the trade manager. So it's basically acknowledging and verifying that it's done. So it doesn't take a lot of time, even though there was a number, I think up to 300 tasks. A lot of the tasks per company were maybe 30, 35, depending on the project, whether it was CSA heavy or MEP heavy. As the project evolved, different contractors could have up to 60 or 70 tasks, but it wasn't that big a deal. It was just having the structure to do it. And with the app we have now that we use, it's basically verifying. So, it's collated and collected by the trade contractor, presented to Mace. The Mace manager agrees, and they say, yeah, I agree, that's 75. So it's basically owned by the trade contractor all the way through.
Just in terms of I think you referenced the weekly meetings. Can I ask you, who's actually doing the talking and doing those last planner meetings? I think a project the size of the data centre, does it fall to one individual, or does it fall to a number of people to actually drive those meetings and coordinate the different trades coming into the room?
Yeah, well, the weekly meetings are coordinated and facilitated, and it's basically the trade contractors who do all the speaking. It's all referencing their plans. We will have the master plan to reference back, and we'll communicate if there's a deviation between one and the other. We have a last planner meeting on a Thursday, which goes through after our weekly coordination meetings. We'd have internal and external coordination. We wouldn't do them all. So there could be 5 weekly meetings, or isolated meetings. Then we'd have a logistics meeting on a Wednesday to make sure that there's no interfaces between inside works and outside works, craneage works, and all that kind of stuff. So there's a process of doing weekly plans on Monday and Tuesday. There's a logistic campus meeting maybe on a Wednesday. Then if there's any changes to agreed weekly plans, it's communicated back to the trades. The trades make the amendments, and then between the trades and Mace managers, they sign off an agreed weekly work plan on Thursday. And that is presented by the trade supervisors to the other trade supervisors at the last planner meeting. So the last planner meeting on a Thursday, everybody on the campus is there. There could be 80 or 90 people, and there'll be 20 guys presenting. Each one will present their own package of works. So it's really done by the guys preparing the plans. It's their meeting.
Okay, so again, I might have just lost you there for a moment or two, but I think we're okay. If I just pick on another question I've got here, I think it's really describing the level of effort required in developing the culture and behaviours in the team. And I'll probably ask the question there as well. Do you get all trade partners on board? Did it ever get to a point when you were developing that culture and behaviour? Was there some people that you just couldn't get over the line in terms of that level of effort?
Yeah, there was various degrees, so I suppose, of resistance. But what we did find was it was actually peer pressure, because it takes a collective effort to deliver the project. If people weren't coming on board, it was actually the trades actually driving, the change, that they needed more information from X in order for them to plan X. And there was that kind of realization that we used that as a forum, that we were saying, okay, look, this is the level of detail we need to be collaboratively. So I suppose as Mace, as a referee, we'd ensure that people had an opportunity to raise that and say, look, this is the level of information that we got. And that's where the leadership comes in as well, because one of the first slides we had is that we have everybody signed up from a leadership level to buy in that. And a lot of the times that is signed in just because it has to be done, not with an understanding of the system. So we're able to escalate that to leaders. So there's a leaders last planner as well, where they have KPI showing how well they're preparing weekly work plans and how well they're producing 6 weeks look ahead. So it is a bit of peer pressure, and again in that leadership meeting it's peer pressure as well, because the directors of each of the other trades are having difficulties in this project are able to communicate at the same level. So that's how people got brought on. They improved their plans by how they interface and reacted with each other. So it really is supported by leadership. So that's where the difficulty arises. If you do have people that are slow to onboard and you don't have the leadership support, it is very difficult to get that embedded into the system. But that's how we managed it.
I think this question actually follows in there, Kevin. The Mace therefore use a preferred supply chain for data centres, so the level of maturity of capability is developing.
Yeah, well, like you're trying to generate trade partnership. You know, it's certainly we're trying to generate that continuous improvement environment, and you do for selection. It is based on performance like everything else, and we do have new contractors coming on board all the time. It's not a closed shop by any means, but it certainly is. There's expectations to get involved, and if you have a core group of contractors that are embedded in the system, as new contractors come on or different people come on to integrate, there's a level, a base level maturity there. So I think it's important that companies with key, and I suppose again I'm talking about the last planner system from a main contractor perspective. You know, there's companies that are trying to integrate onto big projects that have equally successful last planner system, but it's easier to manage because they're just managing their own company. What I was probably describing this one is integrating multi-disciplines into a last planner system. So again, if you have a core group, and that's how the process even grew from 2016. There was a core group of people that got success, and I was able to, bring more people in and have a base level of maturity, and that grew and grew as people got the benefits out of it.
Okay, I've got two more questions that I want to throw at you, Kevin. We've got one here that says, I have experienced a bottleneck using the last planner constraints process. The administration of the number of constraints was problematic. Do you have a suggestion on how best to handle or categorise constraints to best manage that burden?
Yeah, it can be. Yeah, it's essentially you have to a constraint is really something outside your own control. Like a lot of times constraints are like they're of their own making. If they can't have their own design, or they can't get enough of their own men, or it can be a dumping ground. But to actively remove constraints, it's important to you get it should be done in a 6-week window anyway. So typically what I try and do is you get a 6-week look ahead and give me constraints on those tasks. So unless there's a task in the last planner system, there won't be a constraint. I can't just have a constraint coming in about something that's not planned, and that sort of filters out half of them, because they're not entitled to give me a constraint log unless they give me a proper 6-week look ahead with due diligence. So that's part of the system as well, So if you have a 6-week look ahead with a list of constraints, then if you bring those into a look ahead meeting and have those constraints from 3 or 4 of the contractors up there, and actively give an owner to those constraints between. So if there was, an electrician looking for a ceiling to put in his lights, okay, that's a constraint. When are you going to do it? What's your commitment? You're getting other people. There's no point in collecting constraints and you owning the constraints, because you're basically facilitating the last planner system. So to reduce the constraints, you have to throw out half them as nonsense. Like that's your problem, that's your problem. Give me your 6-week look ahead, give me your list of constraints. We'll bring this into a collaborative forum and we will list the constraints, and then we'll escalate them. So the constraints are out of your hand. You escalate them to leadership, and that's where the whiteboard or the I suppose the leadership meeting comes into place. There's constraint that's outside the group's control. You've escalated, and then when it comes up into a meeting again, you can say, yeah, that's been escalated to the director level. They'll come back and give us direction. So managing constraints is a difficult process, but I think managing it in a short-term window and having the caveat that they have to be associated to a 6-week plan makes it easier to categorize and manage constraints, and then you can either remove them or escalate them within that collaborative forum.
Okay. Last question. Can you think about the different construction industries? You know, you spoke about the data centres or pharma type projects, and I come really from a utilities industry. And the question really is, does the system work in all construction projects?
It does work in all construction projects. I don't have the paper name, but Alan Mosman gave a great description of the different contracting methods and how the last planner system, was used and adapted by each. But it's essentially a PDCA cycle. It's the Deming cycle. You plan, you do, you check, you act. The integrity of the system is that you need a plan in the first place to measure against. You need to be able to see what you've done, check that you've done it right, and then you act on your deviations. Did you do enough? Is it the right quality? What are your failures? What stopped you? So it's a really good process for managing your system. But as projects, even all construction projects are unique, so you really do have to start from scratch again. You use your learnings from others, but you just have to build up the last planner system, and it will work as a continuous improvement process and production control process in any industry.
Okay. Kevin, you have done a lot of talking in the last 45 minutes or so, so I'm going to say thanks very much again for today's webinar. I suppose just to note that a copy of the webinar will be sent out to everyone that attended today. We'll also be sending out information shortly in relation to our next webinar, which will take place on the 13th of April, and will be presented by Sam Stacey, who is the Chief Exec of Stats International Limited. I think I'm pronouncing that correct. I suppose for information on this and other webinars, the annual conference, the annual book of cases, and other LCI resources, please visit www.leanconstructionireland.ie, and also please follow us on the LinkedIn page as well. And a final thanks really to everyone that attended today. We very much look forward to meeting you at future Lean Construction Ireland webinars and events. So please enjoy the rest of your day and have a nice evening. Thanks very much.